We always talk about wanting to tell the right stories and put out the right content that's going to drive action and awareness and attention. Attention is great, but you need to be able to take that attention and do something good with it. And there's a lot of ways that I think any marketer could drive attention to their brand, to their content, whatever it might be. There's a lot of tricks out there that we could follow, but I think ultimately it has to serve the right purpose.
I'm Nicole MacLean, and this is Content Matters, created in partnership with Share Your Genius. Our show consists of 3 parts. One, where we pull in other Composely team members to talk about content that matters to you, like a viral LinkedIn post or the latest trend. The second always includes an in-depth interview with a leading marketer, sharing actionable insights and a little inspiration. And finally, you won't want to miss the last segment, aptly called Friends Matter, where we're shouting out some of your friends and mine for their content wins in B2B marketing. Let's cut through the marketing chaos together. Welcome back, Mr. Leonhard, to the podcast. It's great to have you again.
Thank you so much. It's great to be back.
Absolutely. So today we're going to talk a little bit about goal setting, and I'm hoping we can give the audience a little insight into the CEO mind and how to best communicate with executive leadership. So I'd love to hear, what do you think makes a good marketing goal? Or what do you look for when we're building goals?
Impact. Impact is the first and most important descriptive word that I think of when goal setting. What that impact is, I think, needs to align with higher level goals potentially. So depending on at what level you're setting the goals, and if it's marketing goals, it needs to align with what the company objectives are and the company goals are. But typically what I look at is impact. And I think, impact can have many different forms. It can be more tangible, numbers driven, tangible results like, hey, we want to see more MQLs. So all of our activity over the next quarter needs to be focused on driving more MQLs. Could be more intangible, that we need to up-level our branding, right? Or our aesthetic, right? Which presents the brand better and more credibly, but doesn't necessarily have quite that same tangible, hard black and white numbers-driven outcome, but either can have impact. And so I think it's just understanding what is the impact you're looking to make, and then what are the activities and the goals that you're going to set that are going to align with that.
I feel like one of the hardest things of creating good goals, especially in a middle manager or department level, is being specific enough that everyone has alignment and everyone knows what they're working towards, but also giving some flexibility because things change or market trends come in, or you learn things. How do you think you balance having that specificity and clarity, maybe is even better, but also giving individual contributors some freedom to kind of bring themselves into that goal as well?
That's a great question, because at each level, it's a little bit different too, right? The higher up, I think, the chain you are, sort of the broader the goals are, and the ways to achieve them could be, multifaceted. There could be a lot of different paths to take to get there. And so that's why I mention impact, because I feel like, if you keep your eye towards impact, or are the things that I'm thinking about that we're brainstorming, going to have impact or going to drive that result that we're looking to achieve, I think that's sort of the guidepost that you need. In terms of how to set it, I do think some of it is honestly sort of gut and intuition, because I think team members, you need to know which team members need a little bit more hand-holding, a little bit more support, creative support. There are others that can run and execute and drive results. I think I'm speaking to one of those right now. But, basically, I do think part of it is who you're dealing with, whether it could be an individual, it could be your department, a team, that you're working with, and kind of understanding how granular do you need to get to make sure that you're going to drive the impact you need, and how evolved do you want to be? Obviously, you don't want to micromanage, but if you take your hands too much off the wheels, can things go astray? And so I do think a part of that is management and leadership, and understanding the team that you have available, the individuals that you have available to you to help you drive, those goals and that outcome and modulating based on that. So I don't think there's just a hard and fast rule that, it should be this or should be that. I think the great question, because it is a scale. And I think it really depends on the team, the department, the individual, on where on that scale things should fall in terms of how specific and granular you are when you're plotting out and planning your goals.
There's this art to creating these really good goals. But then I think as a marketer, where most people fall short is actually marketing yourself within the organization. I mean, I call it reporting up, but learning the skill set of saying, okay, we've set these goals, whether they're the perfect goals or not, doesn't always matter. It's just important that you have that North Star. But then as a marketing leader, or as you look to move up into more senior, you have to learn how to report on those goals that actually keeps your leadership team out of the weeds and out of the playpen so that they don't feel like they have to get involved. And that is a skill set, I feel like, in itself.
I think that is some sage advice. Probably you're speaking from personal experience with me.
And some other, not you, other micromanaging CEOs. You would never do that.
Yeah, I say this oftentimes, and especially with new members of the team or new members that report into me directly, that my hands are more firmly on the wheel when you're getting started. A, because I want to be there as support. B, to make sure any questions that you have can be answered. But also because, to use another analogy, if you're going to be driving my daughter to school every day, I want to know that you're a good driver. So I'm probably, going to join you on that ride to school the first several times to make sure you're not swerving, falling asleep at the wheel before I trust that you can do it from that point forward. And hands more firmly on the wheel initially, and then I take them off. And I think a lot of that comes with trust and proven execution. But then to your point, it's never good when you have all this in the sudden feeling like you've lost complete line of sight. I mean, the worst case scenario would be you having to report up bad news. And it's been 6 months since you provided any meaningful updates, which should never really happen, right? Should never happen. But just to use an extreme example, if you're not reporting up, you're not keeping leadership informed, your direct, supervisor informed of what's going on, progress that's being made. And then the time comes where you have to report maybe not so good news. You could be putting yourself in a pretty difficult situation rather than giving consistent updates about this is what we're trying, this is what we're seeing, this is what's happening, so that they feel involved, they can provide input, they can, and also, for good managers, good leaders, that's what they're there for, is that if you are struggling to achieve a goal or an objective, you should let them know I'm encountering these hurdles, these issues, these challenges. Do you have any advice, any suggestions, any support that you can give? So making sure that your leadership doesn't lose line of sight on what your focus is on, or what your goal is and the progress towards that goal. And of course, making sure that you're in alignment on the goals that you have, and whether or not your leadership agrees that should be a goal, I think is also pretty critical from the get-go.
It is. And it's also an art and a science again, because you don't want to paint too good of a picture to point, because then if it really is going off the rails, you don't want it to come as a surprise 2-3 weeks, 2-3 months down the road. But you also don't want to be overly negative either. Right. You do want to couch some things, because to point, oftentimes the more senior you're reporting into, the further away they are from the nitty-gritty details. So if they hear something that's not going well, or if you were like, it was successful, or like I got this feedback once more in an IC role, like when I was an event manager, and everyone else was like, this event was great, but I would come back and like, something logistical went wrong, or like I wasn't happy with this, and that would be what I would share. And they were like, Nicole, you are representing the investment of this. You are like, no one else at the company was at this event. You have to set a tone for people to know how it was. And you can have your own opinions or logistical, tactical things that you want to improve on or that you're learning, and that's great. But that's not necessarily like the message you come back. Yeah. And so you have to learn how to couch things and kind of like, what is that narrative? Like as a marketer, what is the narrative you're telling the company about the work you're doing without being overly positive and also not overly negative about where you are? And I think that is, again, a skill And the other big thing that I was told very early as you were looking at reporting up, and I think especially to something like a CEO or a CMO, don't just come with the problem. Come with ideas. Hey, here's what I've thought of. Here's what I've tried. I really am at a loss. Here are all the things we've done. Here's what worked and didn't. Please help me. Or these are things I'm thinking of. Where are blind spots? And I think that, again, is kind of the switch between an individual contributor and a manager, and how that goal setting and reporting looks a lot more healthy in a more senior role.
I think, I've been I think you have more valuable advice to share in reporting up right now than I do. Kudos to you. You've kind of turned it into an art at this point, because I think you do a good job. But everything's about setting expectations. And I say that all the time, whether it's with clients, with vendors, with coworkers, leadership. Everything's about setting expectations. And if expectations are not met, that's when problems start to form. And so if you overpromise and underdeliver, major issue. If your client's expecting one thing and you deliver another, it's going to be a problem. And so I think, with reporting up, it's the same thing of setting expectations, setting realistic goals. And then if you're not meeting them, like you said, coming with honesty and transparency, and then also potential solutions, I think is really important. But this is a two-way street. I'd love to paint it as, tell everybody, hey, take that approach and everything will be great. But there are personalities, I hope I'm not one of them, where it's they don't want to hear bad news. They don't want to hear bad news. And that, to me, is a critical error in leadership and management. If you're not willing to hear what's wrong so that things can be triaged, that's a major, major problem. So I think as someone reporting up, you have to manage the personality, the ego. There's always some element of that to the person that you're reporting into. But in an ideal scenario and environment, you should be able to speak openly and transparently, explain what the issues are, and hopefully get the support you need and the mind share you need to figure out the right path forward. So I just want to be in a real world. It's not always perfect, and I get that. So,
I was it's funny you say that, because I was going to say, I don't think you realize, but I think a big takeaway for leaders listening to this, whether you're a CEO or a CMO, is the importance of creating space for your leaders to learn how to report up. I don't know that you realize it, but I do think you do that well. And it isn't you didn't do this well, so that's it. And I've seen leaders, either I've experienced it myself or I've seen friends who have leaders that maybe don't create that space to learn how to step into that role. So, I'll maybe say it for you, but I think your takeaway, or something I think you should share with leaders, is give your team that space and recognize where you have ego or where you have faults, and don't make that any harder on your team to try to manage. It's the flip side of that too.
Giving them the room to make mistakes as well, because God knows in our journey together, Nicole, over 2 years, there's been mistakes. But the key is making sure that they're not so severe that they're irreparable, right? We take chances, we take risks, we want to try new things, and we do it in a way so that if we fail, we learn from it and it makes us stronger ultimately, right? And we know better. But if you're never giving your team members that space to be able to try things, or you're just unwilling to take the risks ever, I don't think your team members will grow. And I don't think as an organization, you can grow and try novel and new approaches and new ways of doing things. You won't change. That means stagnation, and that's never good for any organization.
Well, and looping us back to the beginning, I think those mistakes have been because there's still alignment into the end goal, into the vision, into what are we trying to achieve. And, as you said, there's often multifaceted, multi paths you can take to achieve those goals, especially at a higher level. We take a chance, we take a risk. It didn't work out, but I still think there's alignment in the fact that, okay, but we are still doing it in the pursuit of this overarching goal, which I think just sets the importance of having that clarity at the highest level as well.
100%. Totally agree.
My name is Jeannie Ruesch, and I am the head of content at a company called 90. 90 is a company that provides the concepts, tools, and disciplines that will help founders grow their companies. And we also provide the app. We're a SaaS company, and we provide the app that will align your team around a company's vision and progress.
All right. Well, welcome to Content Matters. Thank you so much for being on the show. I am extra excited. Not only do I know Jeannie's going to give us some great insights, but I'm a former user of 90.io in a previous company. And I have often gone back and said, I definitely miss our L10s being run on 90. So just a shameless plug. But if you follow the methodology, it is such a helpful tool.
The weekly meetings are by far better than any meetings at any company I've ever been in. And it's because of the methodologies and the frameworks that we use to apply them. So 100% agree. Yeah.
Yes, I know we're going to probably dive into like, what is a good goal? How do you make sure? So I'll save my opinions for that. But one of my favorite questions I love to start off with is just, how did you get to be a head of content? And I think people's journeys are so fascinating. So can you give us a maybe Reader's Digest version of how you got to the role?
Yes. My first love, actually, from the time I was little, was writing. So I've been in love with writing. I actually have written 3 published novels and really focused on the passion of fiction and learning the craft and learning all of those things. Along that way, you realize that, well, you need to make money and you need to have a paycheck. And so it's not always as easy as people think to write novels and make money at it. So I started
It's the classic, right? It's the classic war of
it is, yeah.
livelihood and passion.
Yes. In that mix, I ended up starting as an executive assistant, actually, to a VP of sales and marketing. I'd never considered marketing before, but as soon as I kind of got into that realm, really saw the work that the team was doing and what I was able to participate in, I just fell in love with marketing. I went back to school, got a degree in graphic design so that I could be more well-rounded as a marketer. And then for many years, I focused specifically kind of on the work of design and crafting content. I'll date myself here, but I think before content marketing itself became as widely known as accepted as its own terminology as it is today. But it's what I've been doing for probably the majority of my marketing career. And I got into SaaS and technology companies about, I want to say 10 years ago. And honestly, I've never looked back. Like, I love the pace. I love the high growth. I love the challenge. I am a puzzle solver. So to me, the thornier the content problem, the more happy I am. And so I've managed content programs and teams. And then when I was able to find the role at 90, it was kind of a culmination of all the things that I brought together, and feel very happy to be there. I've been here since February, and it's been amazing. Yeah.
That's amazing. I love that backstory. There's so many questions I want to ask you in that, but to probably the juiciest is when you talk about the thorny content problem. I love that. And I know we've chatted at 90, you have quite a thorny problem that I know I've experienced, and I think a lot of folks do, which is, I'm just going to jump into it, is the OKR problem. You know, so if you're not super familiar with 90, it got its start from EOS, which has a very specific methodology, but it's really just about good goal setting and a framework of how to do that. And yet I feel like goals have actually been swapped out, and now it is ubiquitously between goals, KPIs, and OKRs, which in reality, those each have their own framework and their own methodology, and yet we just kind of say it
interchangeably.
Yeah. And so I'd love to kind of tee up that problem maybe a little bit more for us is, you guys don't do OKRs, you don't do KPIs. Like, there's a very specific way you think about goal setting and alignment.
Well, I will say we actually do KPIs. We look at them a little bit differently, but in the terms of what we're talking about, what people would typically consider a goal or they would consider an OKR, we call a rock. And I love when you think about the analogy of where the rock analogy comes from. It's the rocks in a jar, like rocks, pebbles, and sand. And that's ultimately where the idea comes from, is that if you focus on the big stuff first, you put those items you put the rocks in the jar, and then you fill the rest with pebbles, the medium stuff that has really big impact. And then the sand comes in last. Then you're focusing your business and your team and your productivity on the things that matter the most. If you flop that around and you throw the sand in, then you're going to have a little bit of room for the pebbles, which have a medium impact, but then the rocks that have the biggest impact on your business and your vision, you're not going to be able to fit in. You're going to have to shove them in. And so the idea of calling goals rocks is really about identifying what are the elements that the goals that you as an individual, as a team, as a leadership team, as a company, ladder up to your company goals and your company's vision, and will have the biggest impact on the business going forward. And so I think when you look at the idea of a rock versus a goal could be anything. It could be any size. It could be small, big. It could be any set. It could take a month, a week, 5 days, whatever it might be. Our rocks, when we look at our rocks, we schedule them specifically at 90-day cycles. And part of that is we look at quarters, and we want to make sure that a quarter is long enough to really focus, but not too long to get distracted. And so you can really make sure that everything that you're working on is productive toward what the company is trying to achieve for the goal. But I know where we're coming from this on the content side. I think we want to get back to that. The interesting aspect of this is, as you said, rocks are one of the things that we teach as part of the framework that we use. It's part of how we teach people to think about their vision, how they think about how all of the work boils down and comes down and ladders down to the team. What makes it really interesting when you teach with a word like that, and that is such a big part of your vernacular, that creating content that will be distributed out in different areas, things like organic social and social media and all the other places that may have a much broader, more simple term or not quite so specific way of talking about things, can create some challenges. And so it's really about trying to figure out, really focusing on what we feel is the right way to teach people on how to build their companies the best way that they can. But we also have to figure out how to meet them where they are in the moment that they're in, and the way they talk and the way they think about their problems, and how do we bridge that gap and change the conversation to the way that we think we can help them solve them.
Well, and when you think about really good marketing, that analogy is so powerful and creates such a strong visual in the rocks, and telling a CEO who loves to have you focus on 18 things and everything's a priority, say, let's think of the jar. Let's think of what the jar can fit. It evokes more of an emotion. But yet, I mean, of course, I go to SEO. I can't imagine, you guys want to rank for the term
rock.
You're going to be going after like rock tumblers and geologists. It's just so different intent there. This is the thing that I was so taken when we first met was, how do you build content when your core buyer probably doesn't use the same vernacular that you do?
I think part of it is really understanding, which every marketer knows, like you have to really understand your customer. You have to understand their pain points. Part of that is understanding how they think and talk about things and what they might perceive in that moment as a solution. But we always kind of look at, this is our approach. This is the framework that we offer. This is the way that we teach. And we know that they might not be thinking in that way. To your point, nobody's searching for a rock, thinking that's going to be a goal-setting framework. What they are going to be looking for is something to solve their pain point in the moment. And they're going to be looking for a quick answer to the immediate problem that they're searching for, whatever that intent is, if it's informational, if it's, I need a template for my goals, whatever that might be. And so I think part of the job here for our content is to change that conversation. We need to meet them where they're at, and we need to answer their solutions so they know we understand their problems. But then we also need to present and figure out how to bridge that gap between the way they think and talk about something to the way we provide a solution, and understand that bridge. And I think the bridge is where the magic is going to happen. So, because the way we teach is, we have our guides, we have our content on our website that goes very in depth into the things that we talk about and the way that we believe the company should run, and that are going to help companies overcome their growth challenges. But in order to get into that meat, you have to understand, this is where I'm at today. This is how I see this problem. So help me walk to you. Help me figure out how to walk across that bridge to understand why this is the best way forward.
So many great analogies. We have rocks, we have bridges. I feel like I need to have a little terrarium building session.
I'm probably going to make so many analogies. It's not even funny.
That's great. We love analogies. Are more than welcome here.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I've seen in my career is that we always define, like you said, target market, who's your ideal customer. And it's, of course, always demographic, maybe some psychographic. But I found that really a lot of times, like, our advocates and our power users are more of a philosophy and a mindset that you can't, go to a Zoom Info or an Apollo unfortunately, and say, please give me a list of CEOs who actually care about goals and actually care about their people,
their culture. And
exactly. And I wish we could. So, you find other ways, but that is often really important. So at the end of the day, rocks, goals, OKRs, does it matter what they call it, or does it matter more that they align to the philosophy regardless of what they call it?
I think it matters that they align to the philosophy. A word is, our founder, Mark Abbott, has a saying which actually is really funny since I'm on a podcast called Content Matters, that resonates with me as a writer, that words matter. And they really do. And so I think if you consider what each word symbolizes to somebody, if how they look at what a goal is, how they look at what an OKR is, how we define a rock, and the specific 90-day cycle that's associated to that, as long as they understand the philosophy of why that's important, then I think the words in that aspect, and I'm not sure if Mark will agree with this, could be interchangeable. But if they're looking at a goal is equal to an OKR is equal to a rock, part of that understanding, I think, comes with, it's not just about you as the founder or you as a business leader. It's about how your team and how the rest of the company is operating too. And, one of the biggest things about 90 that I love is the focus on alignment and making sure that everybody is aligned, not only to the work being done, but to the company vision and all of that. And I think that alignment is so important. And words align people or they separate them. They truly do. And so if somebody has one definition of a goal and another person has a different definition of a goal, then you're not aligned. But if you both have the same definition, and let's say we say, okay, we're going to adopt the terminology rock because it's visual. We can, to your point, we can see it we can see the jar. We can understand the meaning behind it. Then you're aligned. Then you're working off the same definition and you're working towards the same thing. So I think it's a bit of both, but it could be either.
Yeah. Well, I think this is another use case of this thorny content problem, but I was in the employee engagement measurement space for 5 years early in my career, and it was everyone thought of employee happiness or employee satisfaction. The ENPS was reign supreme. You had best places to work. And we really tried to say satisfaction and engagement are not the same thing. Very different. And I know you guys take a lot of work in culture and employee engagement in part of your guys' methodology as well. We spend a lot of time educating. I think you really have to take an education first go-to-market strategy when you fundamentally have vernacular or words that are maybe 100%. Not the common word used by your buyer. And there's a little bit of where, we needed the CEO to be bought in. Even if the CEO is not the buyer, if the CEO did not ultimately care about people and getting data and making meaningful change, I don't care. I don't care if he called it satisfaction or he or she called it engagement or satisfaction. It was never going to work. And vice versa. If they were bought in, I do care. We wanted to move the market to understand engagement as a different psychological principle. But ultimately, we needed them bought into that vision and willing to take action towards it.
And willing to recognize how it's going to impact their pain points. And I think kind of like we were talking about SEO and search intent, if somebody's looking for the term goals and we're talking about rocks, how do we bring them across? But I also feel like any of the content that we create has to do that job of shifting somebody's understanding and has to your point, education first. We have to be able to explain, what the pain point, let them know that we recognize that pain point and that we see it and we understand it and that we have a solution. But part of that is going to be a shift of thinking. They have to be willing to commit to change. They have to be willing to understand what that change management is going to require. And then they have to be willing to go towards the solution to solve it. And all of those things have to be true in their mind at every step they take with our content or with everything that we're doing in order to get them where we want them to go. If they don't buy in, they're not going to change.
Well, and it really is category creation motion. A lot of times I feel like we leave that go-to-market motion or that product motion when it is, hey, AI, ChatGPT, OpenAI, category creation of what this AI is. But if you are trying to move someone and get them from one side of the bridge to the other, if they think of OKRs and that's the way they do it, but you're trying to get them to understand rock, it really is a category creation moment because it is so education forward and painting a vision of why this is better. And you don't have to do that in every industry or every product or every service.
No, I mean, to your point, I think some of them are pretty, especially if other companies have led the way forward ahead of time. They know what the category is. People understand what project management is. They understand what certain things are. They understand what accounts payable software is. It's part of where I came from in my background, so it pops to mind. But and you said it exactly right, when you're trying to shift them from thinking about things in one way, but leveling that up into understanding how this one area of their work and what they're trying to solve for is impacted by the rest of their business and impacts the rest of their business, then it is absolutely a shift of thinking. And they have to be convinced. They have to be willing to, they have to start to shift the way they process the information. They have to be convinced. And then they have to be able to be committed to making that change and recognize that change is going to come across their entire company in order for it to be successful.
And putting my sales hat on for a moment, it has been very interesting, but I feel like some of the best sales conversations I've had or sales relationships is actually when you say, I don't know if this is the right fit for you, or if this is what you're looking for, we're probably not it. Yep. Or you're coming to me with what you think you want. And I'm like, I really don't, if that's your goal, I don't think your plan is going to get there. And you have to say it with empathy and support and all that great stuff. But that's normally where you build trust. And you're like, you're not just going to take my money, or you're not just trying to sell me something. I think marketers have to remember that too in our content journeys, that it's okay to say, if this isn't for you, you're not there yet. That's okay. Let's not push you into something you're not ready for. But let's keep educating, keep adding value to get you to the point where you are ready for it.
I love the connection to sales. When I think about some of the salespeople from previous vendors that I still keep in touch with. And part of that is because of the experience and the trust they built with me. And to your point, they would say, no, this is not quite right for you. Let's do this instead. Or let's wait, let's pause. You might think about something else. Really focusing on what is right for the customer, not just right for us. I think is not every salesperson does that. I know a lot of tremendously good ones that do. But I think to your point, as content marketers, we absolutely need to be willing to say, this is perfect for this person in this situation. And we know that because we've tested it, we've proven it, we've tried it. Or if you're over here, maybe you're not ready for it, but I've got other things that I might be able to help you solve until you're ready. Or maybe you're just not ready at all, and this is not the right direction for you. And I can't be afraid to say that as well. And just say, with the content that we create at 90, we're really focused on companies and founders of companies that are trying to grow and are hitting, growth stages and hitting issues and trying to scale a business and, really build their company into what they want it to be. But there's going to be a whole host outside of the, that realm that this might not be the perfect thing for at this point in their business. And, there's a lot that they could learn that might help them frame up where they could go in the future, but there's other things they should be focusing on earlier on.
Well, and that's where marketing helps. That's why, okay, they're not ready. So let's make sure we have really good experiences to just be that partner with them.
And remember me. Yeah. And I'll give you things that, that will help you today and build trust with you. And then, what I'm offering ever be the right solution, you'll remember. And you'll come back and be like, hey, what about that?
As a sales and marketing leader, I'm always interested to hear about a team's tech stack. At Composely, we use Apollo with HubSpot to fuel our outbound outreach. My team loves it. It consistently provides accurate contact information and is incredibly user-friendly. If you're thinking about changing your data provider or just want to hear more about our experience, connect with me on LinkedIn or check out the link in the show notes of this episode. Improve your inbound, increase conversion, and keep your marketing database squeaky clean with Apollo. I do want to transition a little bit because I can't not talk about how to actually set good goals when we have a goal-setting expert on the show. So there's two pieces of this I would love to dive in. One is just, what is a good goal and how should we be thinking about that? And how, as marketers, can we help support that in the organization if, let's say, maybe our leaders aren't the best at setting really good goals? And then part two, I want to dive more into good content goals, but let's set the foundation more of just what is a good goal. Yeah.
I don't know that I would say I'm a goal expert. I think I am always learning on how to set better goals and how to apply that to a better business. I love what you said about, maybe the leaders aren't quite as good as they should be about setting goals. If I go with what I think the biggest issue that I often see in goal setting across marketing teams, it's priorities and urgency. And I think a lot of times we tend to try to do way too much. I think we're all guilty of that.
Oh, no, we've never taken on more than we can.
Yeah, never. Nobody ever does that. We're all just sitting back and, enjoying a margarita at the end of every day.
Sales might say that we're doing arts and crafts. It's not true.
Yeah, but they're on the golf course, so it's okay.
Ooh, I love that.
Yep. I'm sorry. I love my salespeople, the people that I know. Just don't kill me for that. But I think priority setting is one of the biggest keys is like really looking at, let's say that you've got 10 things on your plate that you could do. And if you don't have a system in place, like with 90, we have quarterly conversations with our teams. We set our goals at a senior leadership level, at a company level, at a team level. We do all of that, top to bottom, bottom to top, and make sure that everything is aligned to our overall company vision. If that is not built into your company structure, you can do a lot of that on your own and really work cross-collaboratively with sales departments, with other departments to understand what their priorities are, what their challenges are, and how we might be able to help them as a marketer. But then really narrowing in on what those specific priorities and goals are that are going to have the biggest impact in the next 90 days. Start by there and think through that. And sometimes that might be planning for a big campaign that's going to launch in the following quarter. And I think that's another area that marketers and our marketing teams aren't always so good at, is planning ahead because of all the initiatives that are coming around. But really thinking through, looking at each project and saying, if I know what my company's goals are as a business for the next year, number one, if you don't find out, just keep asking somebody until you get to the answers that you need. But then look at the work that you're doing and saying, does this help achieve that goal? Am I lining up to the company's vision? Am I lining up to the goals that they want to achieve and need to achieve this year? And how can I have the biggest impact possible? And prioritizing that way. And then really just honing in on what it's going to take to logistically and realistically produce, put it into production, get it out into distribution, do all of the things that we have to do as content marketers. So I think anyone who's in content marketing knows that there's systems in place across the beginning to end, from ideas all the way to redistribution. And so each one of those needs to be taken into consideration as you prioritize what to focus on and not forgotten.
Yeah, absolutely. Tactical question, especially you mentioned high growth startup, maybe a little different for an enterprise. But I know I've always struggled with the timing of when to plan, especially with 90 days,
Yeah.
You kind of want to see how the quarter plays out because it could adjust what really is. Like, did this work as well as we thought it did? Did it completely fall short? Do we need to go back to the drawing board? But if you wait, now you're 2 weeks into the quarter, you're 14 days out of the 90 that you're not working and you're not aligned. We don't want to wait, until the first week to kind of start having the conversations. Is there a sweet spot that you found?
I think it's that mix of having short-term impact and long-term impact, and understanding, for instance, we have an annual planning campaign that we're working on right now. Annual planning is a really big key part of 90 and a big key part of how any company should plan for success. And we started the work on this past quarter, and we're launching it out this coming quarter and the quarter after that. So for us, it is sizing the amount of effort and the amount of work that needs to be done each quarter, and understanding back to like what we think is going to have the biggest impact. This is a bigger campaign because we feel like it's going to have a bigger impact. So we're putting more resources toward it and we're planning it farther ahead. But I think if you're in the high growth situations, and I know that a lot of times urgent things come really fast. And so I think there's an aspect of trying to be as nimble as possible, which is always a hard balance when you have a production system in place. And that's not always, moving things from it takes 2 weeks to get this done to I need it in 3 days is really stressful for people. So I think part of it is making sure that you're back to the alignment, making sure that you're fully aligned with what you think is going to move the needle and have the biggest impact, and support other teams' initiatives like sales if you have a sales team. but then looking at the mix of what is a long-term impact project that I can be working on ahead of time versus what are the smaller term impacts that my team can be doing now. And so, SEO is a perfect example of that, because there's some initiatives that we can do on the SEO side that can have that are smaller, quicker wins that we could do today, adjusting, terminology, trying to get, making small tweaks and changes to existing things, existing blogs that will rank for keywords and things like that, versus, okay, the longer play for SEO is going to be really building that hub and spoke model, figuring out the money keywords that we need to be ranking for, that we need to be able to be in the market for, and balancing that mix of both. And I think it's a balancing act, and it is. So I love the puzzle of content because it is a constant puzzle. And at sometimes when things get really urgent, and I always kind of talk about it being a puzzle on fire. And sometimes you have to figure out how to maneuver the pieces when the puzzle is on fire. But hopefully it's not always on fire. And I think that would be a flag. If everything was always on fire, to me, that is a problem that needs to be solved immediately. And
that
figure
in
out
itself
why.
is a rock.
That in
Put out
itself
the
is
fire.
a big rock. Yes. Put out the fires, figure out what's wrong, and go through the systems and figure out where the systems are breaking down. So.
Well, and I also love what you said earlier about whether you have really strong leadership setting it or not, making sure you understand other people's goals in other departments and either where you can support them, because it's always been the best thing to have pushback. Because again, we love sales, but the number of times was, we have a sales meeting on tomorrow and I need a completely new deck. This is top priority, or, whatever the example is, being able to say, okay, I can do this, but then this work for our company OKR or our company goal rock,
Goals.
or
Yep.
see, I'm so ingrained with the OKR.
The words,
My department rock for the quarter, that's going to have to go take a back seat. Is that really what is best for the company to focus on this one project? And suddenly it's less about, oh, you're not trying to be helpful, or marketing's not supporting sales, or product's not supporting CS, or whatever it may be. And now it's just a more objective conversation about what's going to move the entire business forward in the best way.
I would also say in previous roles that I had at Bill.com and Xero, both were in the fintech SaaS space. Building relationships with my sales team was one of my top priorities, especially as a team leader, and making sure when I came into Bill.com, when I started, now it's Bill, connecting with the sales team and understanding, also because they are customer experts. They know so much more than, a fresh marketer in a company or a team is going to know. And they are the biggest opportunity for, I think, any marketer to learn what the actual conversations are that are happening. What are the things that they're saying to move people past objections? What are the things that they're saying to build trust? What are the words that they're saying that immediately push people away? Back to the whole thing that we said at the beginning, words matter. Mark is going to love that I've said this multiple times, but they do. And understanding that with your sales team, and I think really working in lockstep with them to understand, how can I make your life easier? How can I make your conversations with our customers easier? But then also, how can I understand the pain points that they're talking about with you so that I can use that in content earlier on in the process and simplify that and get them into us sooner? If I would say, if there's anything that people could take away from this conversation, connecting with your sales team, if you have a sales team, is key. As a content marketer, as a head of a team, as a member of a team, it doesn't matter. Make relationships with them, talk to them. Every time I would create a new campaign, a new project, a new content campaign, whatever it might be, I took the idea to my sales team first. We had a bi-weekly meeting at Bill.com, and I would take that to them first, and I would say, here's what I'm thinking. How does this resonate for you? And we would adjust, we would make changes, and then we would go forth and create. And they were always super excited to be a part of it. And I think there's so much friction that doesn't need to be there if you just consider them a partner rather than somebody who's pushing things at you to get done. Right? They're pushing things at you because they're missing something, and we can provide that, and we can help, and they can provide us so many things too.
It actually transitions well to another point that you mentioned earlier as well, but it's kind of that internal marketing piece. And yes. I think so often, we do focus as content marketers, get the prospects, focus on lead gen. If you have any time, you also should really be caring about your customers and what's the customer marketing experience.
Yep.
And then third, if at all, It's what about your employees? How are we communicating? And I've seen marketing really need to be the ones that step up in two ways. One, communicating to sales and your customer team. Here is the content we're creating. Sometimes they don't know it exists because they're sales and they're busy, or they're with
90% of the time they don't know it exists.
Exactly. And so figuring out a good cadence, whether that's Slack, whether that's a monthly, weekly, bi-weekly newsletter, the repetition of putting these resources up front, I think is critical. But then also, when you do have those aligned goals, I think marketing has a huge opportunity to make sure that those goals don't just get shown in one all hands meeting at the start of a quarter, but are integrated. Yes. And of course that sits with the leader. But marketing's the best at it. Marketing should be the best in the organization about knowing how to take a message and get it out there and make it resonate. So working as a thought partner with your leadership team to say, how can we ingrain this? How can we put it in Slack? How can we put it in other meetings so that people actually can all list what are the company OKRs, the company goals, the company rocks for this quarter? Because oftentimes, like, the ICs aren't gonna, they don't know what it is. Very rarely could they probably list it.
No. And I will mention it just because I have to. If they're using 90, all of that will be in 90. We get to see like the transparency.
Make it easy. Yeah.
We get to see the transparency of everybody's rocks and how they connect to the departments and all of that. So, but I know we're not here for that. But
no, I love that. Yes.
Yeah. I think the funny thing and I think I've seen this in almost every marketing team and company that I've been in or talked to, marketers are not very good at marketing themselves.
It's so true.
We don't take the time to think about how important it is, to your point, to make sure that our message and what we're creating gets out across the company. That the sales team has access and understands if you're in an early conversation and you're trying to overcome objections and pain points, here's some things that you can send that person to provide value to them, to help them. If you're in client success or you're in customer support and somebody's coming to you because they have a problem and we've created an ebook that solves that problem or helps them walk through how not to have that problem again, go ahead and send them this ebook. Like, the work that we do has value across the company and in so many different connection points with our customers. And I am a big believer that, the trust with our customers and anybody that we're connected to is based on those interaction and touch points. Every touch point is an opportunity to earn trust or ruin it. And so if we have content that will help earn trust and build trust, let's get it out. Let's get it to the people who are going to send it out for us and on our behalf. And make sure that they're aware of it. And to your point, use Slack, use whatever communication tools are available to you. In 90, we have this thing that we can add to a meeting that's called a headline. And it's basically just adding a quick little note that someone can say at the beginning of every meeting, there's this thing that's available. Whatever it is that you can do within the way your company communicates with each other, just get the conversation out, get the content out, make sure they're aware of it. And that they know how to use it. That's the other, it's like not just saying there's an ebook here, tell them when and where to use it. This will help somebody who has this problem. This will help somebody who's trying to ask this question. Help make that easier for them. And then they'll find lots of opportunities to use the content that we're doing.
All right. To help wrap us up, kind of last question, because this has been so much here. Any advice that you would leave? We talked a little bit about sales, but what advice would you share with your fellow marketer?
I feel like it's probably going to sound like a cop-out because everybody says the same thing, but I really do feel like knowing your customers really well is key. But what I will say has been the key difference for me is knowing them personally. And I don't just mean knowing my customer as an avatar. I mean actual names with actual email addresses and LinkedIn that I still keep in touch with years later. And I'll give you an example that talks about the power of this. About 2 months after I left Bill.com and I moved on to another role at another company, a previous customer of mine, and I was in marketing, mind you, I was not sales, I was not customer support. A previous customer of mine reached out to me because she was having a problem at Bill and she wasn't sure what to do. And she's like, I don't know who to talk to anymore. I'm not sure what to do. She's like, I know this is not your job anymore, Jeannie. She's like, but I feel like you'll know who I need to go to and you can help. And I did. I reached out. I knew exactly who to connect her with. And I was like, hey, Can you reach out to them? This is the problem they're having. And he was like, absolutely. I've got it. No worries. To me, that level of knowing your customer when they're willing to reach out to you after you're no longer at the company for help, that makes me a better marketer. That right there is the thing that makes me a better marketer, because not only do I know them that well, I've built trust with them, but in order to build that relationship with her, we spent a lot of time talking, and she wrote content. We co-wrote content together, and we did projects together. We did a lot of co-marketing things together, but I got to know her, and I got to know her problems, and she got to know me, and she got to feel connected to me as part of the company and as an individual. And so, like, know your customers, yes. I think everybody says that, but I don't know how many of them know them personally to the point where they would reach out to them long after they've left a company and ask for help. And like, that's the level of know your customers that I would say every marketer who's listening should adhere to.
Time for another Friends Matter, where we celebrate marketers' incredible accomplishments and bring a little light into the world. This week, we're celebrating Rachel Johnson, who was recently named Pavilion's Fractional Advisor of the Year. Rachel is a powerhouse marketer who's served at companies like ExactTarget and Salesforce and Angie's List before going out on her own to help leaders fractionally. There's a big shift in the market as companies are considering fractional leadership as part of their growth strategy, and it's no surprise to me that Rachel is at the forefront paving the way. I first actually got to meet her when I was a little intern at ExactTarget and have been along for the ride ever since. Rachel's a pillar in the indie marketing community, leading the Pavilion chapter in Indianapolis here in the Midwest, and just is a person who genuinely wants to support and raise up other great marketers. So absolutely well-deserved. Congrats to you, Rachel, and all of the other recently named Go-to-Market Award recipients. If you know someone who's doing great things, let us know. Nominate them at composely/friends-matter so that we can celebrate them on an upcoming show. That's compose.ly/friends-matter. Thanks for listening to this episode of Content Matters, created in partnership with Share Your Genius. If you like the show, please subscribe, leave a review, and share with a friend. Otherwise, you can find all the resources you need to stay connected with us in the show notes. Till next time.